Hi guys, now in 2018 the prices of new electric vehicles seems to have gone up quite a bit. It's actually more of a case of discounts have been removed than prices have gone up. But basically when supply is low and demand is high, manufacturers don't have to discount or even try to sell them, and that is the case with EVs at the moment. Now at this point people tend to turn to the used market. So in this video I'm going to look at what you can get for between £10,000 and £15,000. In the previous video to this I looked at what cars you can get for between £5,000 and £10,000. So if you've missed that, look in the description below and I will put a link to it. So what can you get in the EV world at least for between £10,000 and £15,000 on the UK used market? Now I'm going to assume that nobody has seen the previous video, so if I end up repeating myself you'll just have to forgive me on that one, mainly about the battery leasing and why it can be beneficial financially. Now I'll start at £10,000 to £11,000 and go up as before in £1,000 increments. And in this price bracket, 10 to 11, you can actually get a current model EV, at least in battery size terms. But before I get to that one, I want to throw in this wild card, as it were, and show you an ultra rare EV that I don't think I've ever actually seen in the flesh. It is so rare. I mean, there are literally more Aston Martin DB11s on the road than there is of this particular model. And that model is the awesome Renault Kangoo Maxi ZE Business Crew Van. Now, one common criticism of the current EV market is that there's not much out there in terms of practicality. This is a very practical car. It's got a decent kind of cockpit, it's got 3 proper seats in the back and a cavernous, van slash boot rear. Of course, this is just a van with seats, but it will suit some people, and for £10,800 or less, you can get this with a battery lease. It's a 65 plate, so late 2015, and it's a very, very rare beast. It will suit some people, it won't suit a lot, but it is definitely worth mentioning, and at this price bracket, it's a bargain. Moving on, you'll get a Centre late 2015 Nissan Leaf, fully battery owned of course. There's quite a few of those in this price bracket, and that will be the 24 kilowatt hour version. The 30 is a bit more expensive still. Now at the moment there is extremely low depreciation on EVs, such as the Leaf, because again, demand is high, supply is low. So if you're keeping these for 1, 2, 3 years, you will probably lose very little money in terms of depreciation. Now on to the current model in terms of battery size anyway that I said you could get for between £10,000 and £11,000. This is at the top end of that price bracket, just less than £11,000, but you can get for £10,990 a Renault Zoe ZE40. This is the, as I said, the current battery size, and it will do about 150 to 60 miles in the real world on average. In summer, that will be a little bit higher. It's a 2017 car. It's not 2 years old yet. It's less than 11 grand, and I think that is a billy bargain. Now, of course, it is a battery lease, which is partly why it is so cheap, and it's a private seller. But considering it's less than 2 years old, there's plenty of warranty left on the car itself, let alone the battery, of course, which is leased. It doesn't matter who you buy it from. If you wanted to buy that car and it was fully battery owned, because you could buy them battery leased or complete fully battery owned, you will probably spend about £4,000 on average more than you will for the battery lease version. So let's imagine you spend £11,000 for the battery lease version and £15,000 for the fully battery owned version, the iZoe as it's called. If you lease that, you will obviously have a continual payment forever. It's perpetual, it doesn't stop. So the longer you keep the leased car, the more expensive it gets in comparison to the battery owned car. Now at the moment the leases are working out at about £800 a year, give or take, but that's roughly what you'll be paying. So you're saving £4,000 on the price, 11 to 15 grand, but you're spending £800 a year. So this completely depends on how long you intend on keeping the car. If you're keeping the car less than 3 years, you might as well go for the battery lease version. If you're keeping the car 1 to 2 years, it's a no-brainer. Now think about it, £11,000 and 2 payments of 800 for 2 years will get you to 12,600. The fully battery owned car would be around 15,000. So you're saving £2,500 by buying the battery lease version. And that is when it can be very beneficial on the used market to go on the battery lease kind of side of things. Now in this price bracket, in used terms and in new cars, only Renault do battery leasing. No other manufacturer does that, and only Nissan have ever done it in the past as well. So it's only Renault Zoes that you kind of have to think about when it comes to leasing. Some of the older Nissan Leafs are still available in what they're called flex or battery leasing, but ultimately they can be bought out. So you can buy out the battery lease and make it a whole car, as it were. You cannot do that, at least not at present, with the Zoe. So there we go. For less than 11 grand, a full current generation, at least in battery size terms, Renault Zoe, and I think that's a cracking deal. Now let's look at 11 to 12,000 pounds. It's basically the same as the 10 to 11 price bracket in terms that you'll get an array of Nissan Leafs and Renault Zoes ZE40. You will get a bigger selection, shall we say, and in terms of the 24 kilowatt hour Leaf, it will probably be either slightly newer or maybe a slightly higher spec. Now regarding the Leaf, I would always personally avoid the Visier spec Nissan Leafs, because it's not just that it's a base spec car and it doesn't come with very many options. That might not bother you. It's because it comes with the old style heater, the one that saps your energy and does make a noticeable difference in winter. Any Ascenta or Tecna model Leaf always comes with the heat pump, which is the far more efficient version. That's why the Nissan Leaf 30 kilowatt hour, which isn't in this price bracket unfortunately, only came in Ascenta and Tecna models. So if you are looking on the used Leaf market, unless you're really not bothered about winter range, I would avoid the Visier models. Now the next step is 12 to 13,000 pounds, and of course you will end up with the usual array of ZE40 Zoes, which is basically the current battery size Zoe. You will also end up with the typical array of Nissan Leafs, again still at the 24 kilowatt hour stage. There will of course be higher spec or newer, but you're still not at the Nissan Leaf 30 kilowatt hour stage in this 12 to 13 grand price bracket. However, this price range does give us a new car to play around with, and I think it's correct to say, and certainly in my opinion, probably the best engineered electric car on sale today, and I include Tesla in that. In terms of engineering and materials used and design, this I think is the best EV. It's not the most practical, it's not the biggest, but it is the BMW i3. This one is £12,500 and there are quite a few at this price bracket with the range extender. You're looking at a 2015 model, and although it is a proper 4-seater, it's not a 5-seater, so it's not the most practical car in the world, and the boot isn't huge. It is a brilliant EV and extremely quick. In 0 to 30 terms, it's actually the quickest BMW they make. That's including the M3 and the M5 and all that. Yes, 0 to 30 is a kind of pointless metric, but around town, this thing will show up almost anything. It's also, for me, the only true hybrid on the market. Most hybrids have done it the wrong way around. They've got a small battery range of say 20 miles, and then the rest of the car's range is done using the inefficient petrol engine. The i3 is the other way around, the proper way around for a hybrid. A big battery range and a short petrol range. So you've always got that backup, you've always got that visit a petrol station to get you home syndrome if you need, but the majority of your miles will be done in electric mode and therefore very, very cheap. Moving forward to the 13 to 14,000 pound price bracket. This is where we're getting into nearly new cars now, in some of them anyway. You will of course have the usual range of the BMW i3 with or without range extender, again just higher spec versions or newer versions of what I've already mentioned. There is also another one of these ultra rare wildcards in terms of the Renault Kangoo Maxi Business Crew van. When I say rare, these are the only two on sale in the whole of the UK at the moment. I've checked eBay, I've checked Auto Trader, I haven't gone through everything, granted, but there are two for sale in the whole of the UK. The main difference between this and the other one is that this is priced at a very good 13,200 and it's fully battery owned. There is no lease. It's a 2016 car, in white, and yes, it is just a van with seats, but there are people that would suit this perfectly. Occasional whole family use, or just need to use it as a bit of a work type van, I don't know. But ultimately, it's worth mentioning because I quite like it, weirdly. Now, we are at the top end of the 13 to 14 price bracket now, but you can actually get a 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, which is basically the car I have now. Now, at this sort of price bracket, all of them will be battery owned. I have yet to find a leased 30 kilowatt hour Leaf. In fact, I'm not even sure they ever did them. So for just shy of 14,000, it's a 66 plate, so a late 2016 Nissan Leaf 30 kilowatt hour Ascenter. Moving on to the Renault Zoe, which of course has been available since, well, £6,000 and up. This is the ZE40 as it is before, but this is the R110. They have basically upgraded, I suppose, the motor, so it's a quicker car. That was one criticism of the Renault Zoe. When you kind of got above 30-40 miles an hour, it was a bit breathless. You know, it accelerated, it wasn't as good. It wasn't as good as the Leaf, it certainly wasn't as good as the i3. But they've updated the motor, and this one for £14,000 exactly from a Renault dealer is a late 2018 car. Now, if I'm honest, I would probably recommend anybody looking at that 14 grand nearly new Zoe to not buy it. And the reason is, if you know who to ask, how to play the Renault game, you can actually get a brand new Zoe for about the same price, for not much more than 14 grand for a brand new battery leased Zoe. Ultimately, it's about the same price as a new one. So although it's there, it's readily available, and you might think it's a good price, which it is, I suppose, but ultimately I'd rather go for the new one. Even if it's 500 or even £1,000 more than that, I'd rather go for the brand new one at my spec, my colour, than a nearly new one. I tend to find this with many cars. In fact, nearly every new car I have ever bought, Octavia VRS, Polo GTI, the one that was nicked when it was 3 months old, I bought them by shopping around and looking online for less than the nearly new examples were going for. So this sort of idea that cars lose a big chunk of their value as soon as they drive them off the forecourt only applies to those that don't do any research, don't haggle, don't contact 10 different dealerships and look on a dozen different websites. So basically, if you're lazy, nearly new is good. If you put some effort into it, you can typically get a new car using discounts and various other methods than you can then. So although 14 grand you're getting a nearly new Renault Zoe, I would recommend you're going for a new one. Now we're at the top of our price bracket, 14 to 15 grand. This is pretty much as you were in terms of cars available. You have a load of i3s, of course, again, just newer or better spec than the previous prices, and the same for the Nissan Leaf 30 kilowatt hour. Just newer and better spec ones once more, and a bigger choice. This seems to be the typical price of the cheapest 30 kilowatt hour Leafs at the moment, between 13.5, 14.5 grand. And of course, you've got a ton of nearly new Renault Zoes. But as I've said before, it's at the new car price if you are savvy with what you do with it. So that's basically it. At 14, 15 grand, you're looking at a Leaf, an i3 or a Zoe. And there we are. That's what's available between £10,000 and £15,000 on the used EV market. Again, not a huge choice because, quite frankly, compared to petrol or diesel cars, there's still a very limited sector out there in terms of how much manufacturers are producing. That is changing. In the next 2 to 3 years, there will be a ton of electric cars coming out from various manufacturers. And of course, the more cars come out from them, the more cars eventually trickle into the used market. This is why things like the Leaf 30 or a leased battery Zoe can make very much sense if you're just needing a bit of a stopgap until this glut of new EVs come out. If for whatever reason our Leaf had to go back or it disappeared or whatever and I had to get another car now, I would probably go for either a leased Zoe or another 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, just to tide me over until my Tesla Model 3 on a first day reservation eventually turns up. God knows when that will be, probably a minimum of 6 months to 18 months, depending on the spec I pick. But that's where we're at the moment. Some people are ready, some early adopters are okay with that. If you have 2 cars in your household, it's almost a no-brainer. But because they're not quite there yet, but a lot of people want one, they think, oh, I'll wait a bit, and then they wait a bit, and then they wait a bit, and they ultimately never end up getting one. I know a few people out there that wanted to buy an EV a year ago and didn't for whatever reason, and now they're looking at the same cars at the same prices, only they're a year older. If they'd have bought it then, they'd have lost nothing in the last year in terms of depreciation. My Leaf outside was valued at about 13.5 grand a year ago, and it still is. Even though it's a year older and I've piled another, I don't know, 16, 17, 18,000 miles on it. Couple near zero depreciation on some models at least with ridiculously cheap running costs. For example, I pay £135 in fuel for every 10,000 miles I do in that EV, at home charging anyway. So yes, as usual, EVs aren't for everyone yet. The range isn't quite there, the selection isn't quite there, but if you, for whatever reason, are definitely wanting an EV, this is your choice. As I said earlier, if you want to look at a cheaper price bracket, 5 to 10 grand, the link is in the description below to that video. And if I can figure it out, I will put it in the corners of the video at the end. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. Please put in the comments below which one you would choose, or if you've bought a used EV in this price bracket. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.